The thunder of 47 Harley-Davidson motorcycles echoed through the Nevada desert like rolling thunder from an approaching storm. The Highway 50 truck stop stretched across the barren landscape, its weathered buildings and cracked asphalt marking one of the few signs of civilization between Reno and Las Vegas. The October sun beat down mercilessly on chrome and leather as the Iron Brotherhood Motorcycle Club rolled to a stop in a cloud of dust and exhaust fumes that seemed to announce their arrival to every living creature within 20 miles. Riley, McKenzie, cut his engine and removed his helmet, revealing a face that bore the scars of 35 years riding the roughest roads in America. As president of the Iron Brotherhood's Nevada chapter, he commanded respect through a combination of fearlessness, loyalty, and an unwavering commitment to the brotherhood that bound these men together. His leather vest, adorned with patches that told the story of countless miles and harder battles, marked him as someone who had earned his position through actions rather than words. The truck stop offered little in terms of comfort or convenience, but it served the basic needs of travelers crossing the vast emptiness of central Nevada. A single row of fuel pumps stood before a building that housed a small restaurant, gift shop, and mechanical repair bay that looked like it had seen better decades. The entire complex seemed designed by someone who understood that in this part of the world, function mattered more than form. "Brothers," Razor called out, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard over the roar of engines and road noise. "We take 30 minutes here, then push on to Vegas. Church meetings at 8, and we don't keep our business associates waiting." The riders began dismounting with the practiced efficiency of men who had made this journey countless times. Some headed toward the restaurant for coffee and whatever passed for food in this forgotten corner of the state. Others moved toward the fuel pumps, their machines hungry for the gasoline that would carry them across the remaining 200 miles to their destination. But it was Tommy Tank Rodriguez who discovered the problem that would change everything. Tank, whose nickname reflected both his physical size and his preferred method of handling disagreements, stood beside his 1947 Harley knucklehead, his face clouded with the kind of concern that motorcycle riders learned to recognize as serious trouble. "Razor," Tank called out, his voice carrying over the conversations and engine noise. "We got a situation here." The Brotherhood gathered around Tank's motorcycle with the focused attention of people who understood that mechanical failure in the middle of nowhere was more than an inconvenience. It was a potentially life-threatening situation that required immediate assessment and decisive action. The Knucklehead, a classic, one of the most coveted motorcycles in Harley-Davidson history. Its restoration represented not just financial investment, but countless hours of meticulous work that had transformed a rusted piece of history into a rolling work of art. "Compression feels good," Razor muttered, working the Kickstarter to assess the engine's mechanical condition. "Spark plugs are getting fire. Fuel's flowing clean." He paused, his expression growing more puzzled with each test. "This doesn't make sense. Everything checks out, but she's deader than disco." The diagnosis attracted attention from other mechanics in the group, men whose knowledge of Harley-Davidson engines had been earned through years of keeping their machines running despite abuse that would kill lesser motorcycles. Mickey "Wrench" Sullivan, whose nickname reflected his legendary ability to repair anything with an engine using nothing but basic tools and creative profanity, scratched his head as he studied the silent knucklehead. "Could be electrical," Mickey suggested, though his tone carried doubt. "Maybe the generator's gone bad or there's a short in the wiring harness." "Already checked," Tank replied, with his frustration growing with each failed diagnosis. "Electrical system's perfect, batteries fully charged, all connections are clean and tight. It's like the engine just decided to take a permanent vacation." The problem attracted attention from beyond the Brotherhood as other travelers began gathering around the impressive collection of motorcycles. Among them was Harold Peterson, a semi-retired truck driver whose knowledge of diesel engines was legendary among long-haul drivers throughout the western states. Harold approached with the careful respect that civilians typically showed when encountering motorcycle clubs, but his mechanical curiosity overcame his caution as he studied the silent Harley. "Mind if I take a look?" Harold asked, his weathered hands already moving toward the engine before receiving permission. "I've been working on engines for 40 years, and I've seen some strange problems in my time."
Razor nodded, recognizing a fellow mechanic despite their obvious differences. Harold's examination was thorough and systematic, his experienced fingers testing components and connections with the methodical approach of someone who understood that engine problems often hid in unexpected places. "This is strange," Harold said finally, straightening up with a puzzled expression. "Everything looks perfect, but there's something wrong with the internal timing. It's like the engine's forgotten how to be an engine." The comment drew chuckles from some of the Brotherhood, but Harold's serious expression suggested he wasn't attempting humor. There was something genuinely puzzling about the knucklehead's condition, something that challenged conventional diagnostic approaches. "How long would it take to rebuild the top end?" Tank asked, though he already knew the answer would be unacceptable. "Maybe the timing chain jumped, or there's internal damage we can't see." "3 days minimum," Mickey replied, his tone carrying the finality of someone delivering bad news. "Maybe longer if we find serious internal problems, and that's assuming we can get parts delivered to this place, which seems about as likely as finding a Starbucks in a ghost town." The time constraint represented more than mere inconvenience. The Brotherhood's business in Las Vegas was time-sensitive, involving negotiations with associates who didn't appreciate delays or excuses. Mechanical problems were part of motorcycle culture, but they couldn't be allowed to interfere with obligations that extended beyond personal transportation. It was at this moment that Maya Santos emerged from the repair shop, her appearance marking the beginning of a confrontation that would challenge every assumption the Brotherhood held about mechanics, motorcycles, and the nature of expertise itself. Maya stood barely 5 foot 4 inches tall, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail that kept it clear of machinery and moving parts. Her coveralls bore the honest stains of someone who worked with her hands for a living, and her tool belt contained an impressive array of specialized instruments that suggested serious mechanical expertise. At 28, she had already established herself as one of the most capable motorcycle mechanics in Nevada, though her reputation was largely confined to customers who valued results over appearances. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying a confidence that seemed disproportionate to her size. "I couldn't help overhearing your discussion about the knucklehead. Mind if I take a look?" The suggestion created an immediate shift in the atmosphere around Tank's motorcycle. Conversation stopped mid-sentence as 47 members of the Iron Brotherhood processed the unprecedented situation of a young woman offering to diagnose their mechanical problems. The silence stretched uncomfortably as Maya waited for permission to approach the bike, seemingly unaware that she had just challenged social conventions that had governed motorcycle culture since its beginning. Razor studied Maya with the careful attention he typically reserved for potential threats or opportunities. Her confidence was unmistakable, but confidence without competence was dangerous when dealing with expensive machinery. The knucklehead represented not just transportation, but Tank's pride, and a significant financial investment that couldn't be risked on amateur experimentation. "No offense, lady, but this is a pretty serious machine. It's not like the rice burners most shops work on." "None taken," Maya replied with a slight smile that suggested she'd heard similar comments before. "But engines are engines, regardless of their country of origin or cultural significance. And this particular engine is telling me something interesting." The claim that she could diagnose problems by listening to a silent motorcycle struck several Brotherhood members as either delusional or deliberately provocative. Engines that weren't running couldn't communicate anything except their obvious failure to function properly. "What exactly is it telling you?" Tank asked, his tone carrying skepticism mixed with desperate hope that someone might understand his mechanical catastrophe. Maya moved closer to the knucklehead, her hands moving over its components with the gentle precision of someone reading Braille. Her examination was different from the previous diagnostics, focusing on subtle details that the others had overlooked in their systematic testing of major systems. "This is not a mechanical failure," she said finally, her fingers still exploring the engine's intricate details. "It's a fuel mixture problem, but not what you'd expect. The carburetor's been modified with precision jets that are creating a mixture too lean for the engine's current configuration." The diagnosis was specific enough to be credible, but sufficiently technical to be verifiable. Mickey moved closer to examine the carburetor, his experienced eye confirming that the jets had indeed been modified beyond factory specifications.
"Those jets were changed when I rebuilt the carb last spring," Tank said slowly. "Shop in Reno said they'd improve performance at high altitude." "They would," Maya agreed, "but only if the ignition timing was advanced to compensate for the leaner mixture. Without that adjustment, the engine runs progressively worse until it won't run at all." The explanation made sense to the mechanics in the group, but it raised uncomfortable questions about how Maya had diagnosed the problem without even starting the engine. Her assessment had been faster and more accurate than their combined efforts, despite their decades of experience with Harley-Davidson motorcycles. "So you're saying it's just a timing adjustment?" Razor asked, his tone carrying doubt. "That's a 15-minute fix." "Should be," Maya replied, "except the timing mechanism has been seized by corrosion that's invisible from the outside. It'll need to be completely disassembled and cleaned before any adjustments can be made." She paused, studying the faces around her with the calculating expression of someone making a decision that would have significant consequences. "I can have it running in 2 hours," she said quietly, "but I'll need access to my shop and some specialized tools that aren't typically found in truck stop repair bays." The offer hung in the air like smoke from a just-extinguished fire. 2 hours versus 3 days represented the difference between keeping their Vegas appointment and explaining to business associates why mechanical problems had interfered with professional obligations. "What's your rate?" Tank asked, though money had become secondary to time constraints. "Normally 200 for this type of work," Maya replied, "but I'm curious about something. How sure are you that I can't fix your motorcycle?" The question seemed designed to provoke conflict, but Maya's tone remained conversational rather than confrontational. She was studying the Brotherhood with the same analytical attention she had given the knucklehead, as if they were a mechanical problem requiring diagnosis. "Pretty sure," Razor said slowly, uncertain where the conversation was heading. "No offense, but this isn't exactly your typical motorcycle repair." Maya's smile broadened slightly, revealing a competitive edge that had been hidden beneath her professional demeanor. "What if we made it interesting? A small wager on whether I can get that knucklehead running like new." The suggestion of gambling immediately captured the Brotherhood's attention. These were men who had built their lives around calculated risks, who understood that sometimes the biggest rewards required the biggest gambles. But Maya's confidence seemed disproportionate to her apparent experience with vintage Harley-Davidson engines. "So what kind of wager?" Mickey asked, his curiosity overcoming his skepticism. "If I can't get that bike running perfectly within 2 hours, I don't charge anything for the work. But if I succeed, you pay me $1,000 instead of the usual $200. The terms were aggressive but not unreasonable considering the time constraint and the complexity of the diagnosis. $1,000 was significant money, but it was less than the cost of missing their Vegas appointment or paying for emergency transportation to complete their business. "And if you break something?" Tank asked, protective of his restored classic. "Then I buy you a replacement engine. Fair enough?" Razor looked around at his brothers, reading their expressions with the intuitive understanding that came from years of group decision-making. The wager was risky, but the alternative was accepting defeat based on assumptions about gender and mechanical expertise that might not reflect reality. But it was Diesel Dave Morrison who escalated the situation beyond anyone's expectations. Dave, whose nickname reflected both his preferred fuel and his tendency toward extreme positions, had been growing increasingly agitated during the discussion. At 42, he embodied the traditional values of motorcycle culture and viewed challenges to established hierarchies as threats to everything the Brotherhood represented. "Hold on," Dave said, his voice carrying an edge that made conversations stop throughout the truck stop. "We're talking about $1,000 like it's serious money. If this little lady is so confident about her mechanical skills, let's make a real bet." Maya turned toward Dave with the focused attention of someone recognizing a significant escalation in the stakes. Her expression remained calm, but her posture shifted slightly, suggesting she was prepared for whatever challenge he might propose. "What did you have in mind?" she asked quietly. Dave's grin was predatory as he reached into his leather jacket, producing a roll of bills that represented the kind of money most people earned in months rather than carried in their pockets. The cash was bound with a rubber band that he removed with deliberate ceremony, counting out bills with the theatrical precision of someone making a statement that extended beyond mere gambling.
$1 million, Dave announced, his voice carrying across the truck stop parking lot like a declaration of war. Says you can't get that knucklehead running like new. Not just running, but performing better than it did when Tank bought it 3 years ago. The sum was staggering, representing more money than most mechanics earned in a decade. But more than the financial stakes, Dave's challenge carried implications about expertise, gender roles, and the fundamental assumptions that govern relationships between men and women in traditionally male-dominated fields. Maya stared at the pile of cash for several seconds, her expression unreadable as she processed the magnitude of what had just been proposed. Around them, the truck stop had fallen silent as word of the extraordinary wages spread among the travelers and staff. $1 million? She repeated slowly, as if testing the reality of what she had heard. You're betting $1 million that I can't repair a motorcycle engine? That's right, Dave confirmed, his confidence unwavering despite the astronomical stakes. But there are conditions. You work alone, no outside help, no calling in favors from other mechanics. Just you, your tools, and 2 hours to prove that all your confidence isn't just talk. The conditions were designed to eliminate any advantages Maya might have through collaboration or consultation with more experienced mechanics. She would be isolated with nothing but her own knowledge and skills to overcome whatever problems lay hidden within the knucklehead's engine. And if I succeed? Maya asked, though she seemed already to know the answer. Then you walk away with more money than you see in the rest of your lifetime. But when you fail, and you will fail, you admit publicly that some jobs are too big for someone like you. The personal insult was unmistakable, transforming a mechanical challenge into something that touched on dignity, self-respect, and the broader social dynamics that determined who was taken seriously in professional environments. Maya looked around at the faces surrounding her, reading the expressions of men who had built their identities around mastery of machines and dominance over mechanical challenges. Some showed skepticism, others curiosity, but all reflected the assumption that the outcome was predetermined by factors that had nothing to do with actual mechanical ability. "I'll take that bet," she said quietly, her words falling into the desert silence like stones into still water. The acceptance sent shockwaves through the crowd that had gathered to witness what was becoming an unprecedented confrontation. Conversations erupted in multiple languages as word spread that a young woman had just accepted a $1 million challenge to repair a motorcycle that had stumped some of the most experienced mechanics in the western states. "Wait a minute," Harold Peterson interjected, his truck driver's practical sense overcoming his fascination with the developing drama. "Does anybody here actually have $1 million to cover this bet?" The question cut through the excitement like a blade, raising the practical issue of whether Dave's dramatic gesture was backed by actual financial resources. $1-million bets were one thing in movies and legend, but quite another in the parking lot of a Nevada truck stop where most people measured wealth in hundreds rather than millions. Dave's grin faltered slightly as the practical implications of his challenge became clear. The Iron Brotherhood was successful, but their activities generated income measured in thousands per operation, not the kind of generational wealth required to back seven-figure wagers. "We're good for it," Razor said carefully, though uncertainty flickered in his voice. "The Brotherhood honors its commitments." "With what?" Harold pressed, his skepticism growing with each evasive answer. "You can't cover $1 million bet with good intentions and motorcycle club solidarity?" The challenge to provide actual collateral created an uncomfortable silence, as the reality of the situation became clear. Dave's theatrical gesture had committed the Iron Brotherhood to a financial obligation they couldn't possibly meet through conventional means. But it was Maya who provided the solution that would make the extraordinary wager possible. "I have an alternative proposal," she said, her voice cutting through the confused discussions with startling clarity.
What could be more valuable than $1 million? Especially in a confrontation that had already escalated beyond all reasonable proportions. If I fix the knucklehead, Maya continued, the Iron Brotherhood makes a public statement acknowledging that mechanical expertise has nothing to do with gender, age, or social expectations. You post it on your website, social media, everywhere your influence reaches. The terms were startling in their simplicity and their implications. Rather than seeking financial gain, Maya was proposing a wager that would force one of the most traditional motorcycle clubs in America to publicly challenge stereotypes that had governed their culture since its founding. "And if you fail?" Dave asked, though his earlier confidence had been shaken by Maya's unexpected counter-proposal.
"Then I publicly acknowledge that I was wrong to challenge the Brotherhood's expertise," Maya replied. "I apologize for wasting your time and admit that some mechanical problems are beyond my abilities." The revised terms created a different kind of tension. Instead of financial stakes, the wager now involved reputation, dignity, and the broader social implications of challenging established hierarchies based on assumptions rather than demonstrated competence. Razor looked around at his brothers, reading their expressions with the intuitive understanding that came from years of collective decision-making. The wager had evolved beyond gambling into something that touched on the fundamental values that defined their organization. "Deal," he said finally, extending his hand toward Maya with the formality of someone sealing a contract that would have consequences extending far beyond the immediate mechanical challenge. Maya shook his hand with a grip that was firm without being aggressive, professional without being cold. Around them, the truck stop had taken on the atmosphere of a gladiatorial arena as word continued spreading about the extraordinary confrontation developing in the parking lot. 2 hours, Dave said, checking his watch with the precision of someone marking the beginning of what he expected to be Maya's professional humiliation. "Starting now." Maya nodded, already moving toward the knucklehead with the focused determination of someone who understood that the next 2 hours would determine not just the outcome of an unusual wager, but her credibility as a professional in a field where women were rarely taken seriously. As she knelt beside Tank's pride and joy, her hands moving over the engine with gentle precision, 47 members of the Iron Brotherhood settled in to watch what they assumed would be the inevitable failure of someone who had challenged assumptions that had governed their world since its beginning. But Maya Santos had built her reputation on understanding that engines revealed their secrets to those who knew how to listen. And this particular engine, despite its silence, was about to tell her everything she needed to know about restoring life to mechanical perfection. The next 2 hours would prove that sometimes the most important repairs involve not just broken machines, but broken assumptions about who possesses the knowledge and skill to fix them. Maya Santos moved with the fluid precision of a surgeon as she wheeled her mobile tool cart from the repair shop toward Tank's silent knucklehead. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the truck stop parking lot, creating a natural amphitheater where 47 members of the Iron Brotherhood had arranged themselves to witness what most assumed would be her inevitable failure. The weight of their collective skepticism was almost tangible, but Maya had learned long ago that doubt from others could fuel determination rather than undermine it. Her tool cart represented 15 years of careful investment in professional excellence. Each implement had been selected not for its brand recognition or aesthetic appeal, but for its ability to solve specific mechanical problems that conventional tools couldn't address. The cart's organization reflected a mind that understood efficiency came from knowing exactly where each tool belonged and being able to access it without conscious thought when crisis demanded instant solutions. "First things first," Maya said, speaking directly to Tank while ignoring the crowd that had gathered to watch her work.
I need to understand exactly what modifications have been made to this engine since it left the factory in 1947. Tank's expression shifted from skepticism toward genuine interest as he recognized that Maya's approach differed fundamentally from the previous diagnostic attempts. Instead of immediately diving into mechanical testing, she was gathering information that would inform her understanding of the engine's current configuration versus its original specifications. "Complete frame-off restoration," Tank replied, his pride in the motorcycle temporarily overcoming his doubts about Maya's abilities. "Rebuilt the engine with modern internal components, upgraded the electrical system, modified the carburetor for better performance at altitude." "What about the oil system?" Maya asked, her hands already exploring the engine's lubrication pathways with practiced familiarity. "Any modifications to pressure relief valves or oil pump specifications?" The question caught Tank off guard, revealing knowledge that went beyond basic motorcycle maintenance into the specialized realm of vintage Harley-Davidson engineering. Oil system modifications were subtle changes that could affect engine performance in ways that weren't immediately obvious to casual observers. "Yeah, the shop in Reno upgraded the oil pump and added a spin-on filter conversion. Said it would improve reliability and extend engine life." Maya nodded, making mental notes about modifications that created interconnected effects throughout the engine's operating systems. Each change, while beneficial individually, could create unexpected consequences when combined with other improvements that hadn't been properly integrated. "Tell me about the carburetor jets," she continued, her fingers now exploring the fuel delivery system with the gentle precision of someone reading mechanical braille. "What size jets were installed, and were any other fuel system components modified at the same time?" Mickey Wrench moved closer, his curiosity overcoming his initial dismissive attitude. Maya's questions demonstrated understanding that went beyond what he had expected from someone working at a truck stop repair shop in the middle of nowhere, Nevada. "Main jets were increased from stock size to accommodate the engine modifications. Pilot jets were also changed, and they installed a different needle valve assembly. But the ignition timing wasn't adjusted to compensate for the richer fuel mixture," Maya said, her statement carrying the confidence of someone who had already identified the root cause of the problem. "And the oil system modifications created increased pressure that affected the automatic timing advance mechanism." The diagnosis was specific enough to be verifiable, but complex enough to demonstrate expertise that surprised everyone listening. Maya wasn't guessing or throwing out random possibilities. She was systematically identifying interconnected problems that created cascade failures throughout the engine's operating systems. Razor stepped closer, his expression shifting from casual interest toward focused attention. "You're saying multiple systems are affecting each other?" "Exactly," Maya replied, now removing her first tool from the cart with purposeful determination. "The carburetor modifications created a fuel mixture that required different ignition timing, but the oil system changes affected the mechanical timing advance mechanism, preventing proper adjustment. The engine was running progressively worse until thermal expansion finally seized the timing mechanism completely." She held up a specialized tool that looked like a dental probe and a precision measuring instrument. "This is a timing mechanism extraction tool. Most shops don't have one because they're expensive and rarely needed. But vintage Harleys with modified oil systems develop this exact problem more often than people realize." The tool's specialized nature suggested that Maya's confidence wasn't based on luck or general mechanical knowledge. She had encountered this specific problem before and invested in equipment that most mechanics would never need. "How long have you been working on motorcycles?" Harold Peterson asked, his truck driver's practical curiosity overcoming any hesitation about interrupting the diagnostic process.
"Since I was 12, Maya replied, without looking up from her work. "My grandfather owned a Harley dealership in Phoenix until Indian motorcycles went out of business in the 50s.
He taught me that engines are conversations between metal and motion, and if you listen carefully, they'll tell you exactly what's wrong. The personal history explained capabilities that seemed incongruous with her current location and circumstances. Growing up in a motorcycle dealership would have provided exposure to vintage machinery and restoration techniques that most modern mechanics never encountered. Dave Morrison, whose million-dollar challenge had escalated the stakes beyond all reasonable proportions, watched Maya's initial work with growing unease. Her systematic approach and specialized tools suggested preparation for challenges that went far beyond simple mechanical repairs. "Time check," Dave announced loudly, his voice carrying the forced confidence of someone trying to maintain control of a situation that was developing in unexpected directions. "You've used up 20 minutes just talking and looking around. Only an hour and 40 minutes left to perform miracles." Maya glanced at her own watch, noting the time with calm precision rather than anxiety. "That's fine. The diagnostic phase is the most important part of complex repairs. Rushing into mechanical work without understanding the problem completely is how good engines get destroyed." She selected a different tool from her cart, this one resembling a miniature periscope with fiber optic lighting that could illuminate internal engine components without requiring complete disassembly. The device was clearly expensive and highly specialized, suggesting investment in equipment that went far beyond what most mechanics could justify financially. "I'm going to look inside the timing mechanism now," Maya announced, carefully inserting the inspection device into a small access port that most people wouldn't have known existed. "This will show us exactly what condition the internal components are in without disturbing anything that doesn't need to be disturbed." The fiber optic display connected to a small monitor that allowed everyone nearby to see what Maya was observing inside the engine. The images revealed mechanical components that had been polished to mirror finishes, precision machine surfaces that reflected the kind of restoration work that cost thousands of dollars and required serious expertise to execute properly. "There's the problem," Maya said, pointing to an area of the display where metal components appeared to be locked together in ways that prevented normal operation. "The timing advance weights are seized by corrosion that formed when different metal types in the modified oil system created galvanic corrosion." The technical explanation was beyond what most of the observers understood, but Mickey Wrench's expression showed recognition of a diagnosis that made mechanical sense. Galvanic corrosion was a real phenomenon that occurred when dissimilar metals were exposed to electrolytic solutions under specific conditions. "Can it be repaired?" Tank asked, his voice carrying hope mixed with concern about potential damage to his restored engine. "Definitely, but it requires complete disassembly of the timing mechanism, ultrasonic cleaning of all components, and reassembly with proper anti-corrosion compounds that should have been used during the original restoration." She was already selecting tools for the disassembly process, her movements efficient and purposeful despite the complexity of the work ahead. The timing mechanism repair would require removing dozens of precisely fitted components, cleaning each one individually, and reassembling everything with tolerances measured in thousandths of inches. "This is impossible," Dave muttered, though his protest sounded more like wishful thinking than confident prediction. "Nobody can do precision engine work in a truck stop parking lot with a crowd of people watching every move." Maya paused in her tool selection to look directly at Dave, her expression calm but determined. "I've rebuilt motorcycle engines in worse conditions than this. Desert dust and audience pressure are nothing compared to trying to diagnose electrical problems during a thunderstorm or replacing a blown head gasket in sub-zero temperatures." The reference to extreme working conditions suggested experience that went beyond casual motorcycle maintenance. Maya had apparently worked in situations where environmental challenges made current circumstances seem almost comfortable by comparison. Besides,
she continued, returning her attention to the knucklehead. Good tools and proper technique overcome environmental limitations, and this engine wants to run. I can feel it in the way the components fit together. The anthropomorphic description of mechanical desire struck some observers as mystical nonsense, but others recognized the intuitive understanding that marked master craftspeople in any field. Maya wasn't projecting human characteristics onto machinery. She was describing the subtle feedback that experienced mechanics learn to interpret when working with precision equipment. The disassembly process began with methodical removal of external components that provided access to the timing mechanism. Maya worked with steady rhythm, each component carefully cleaned and organized on a white cloth that allowed her to maintain inventory of dozens of small parts that would need to be reassembled in precise sequence. "Holy cow!" Mickey breathed as Maya revealed the timing mechanism's internal complexity. "I've never seen one of these completely apart. Look at all those precision components." The timing advance system contained more than 60 individual pieces, each machined to tolerances that required specialized measuring equipment to verify proper fit. Springs, weights, bushings, and control surfaces worked together in mechanical harmony that could be disrupted by contamination measured in microscopic quantities. Maya's ultrasonic cleaning equipment, powered by a portable generator from her tool cart, operated with high-frequency vibrations that removed corrosion and contamination from surfaces that couldn't be reached by conventional cleaning methods. The process took 35 minutes of careful work, with each component cleaned individually and inspected under magnification before being approved for reassembly. "Time check," Dave announced again, though his voice now carried less confidence than earlier proclamations. 45 minutes remaining, and you're still taking things apart instead of putting them back together." "Patience," Maya replied, without looking up from her work. "Good repairs can't be rushed, and shortcuts create problems that are worse than the original failures." The reassembly process required even greater precision than disassembly. Each component had to be positioned exactly right, with clearances and relationships that affected the entire system's ability to function properly. Maya worked with steady concentration, occasionally consulting specifications from a well-worn manual that contained factory information about tolerances and assembly procedures. "Where did you get that manual?" Razor asked, recognizing the document as something that wasn't readily available to casual enthusiasts. "My grandfather's collection. He kept factory documentation for every motorcycle the dealership ever serviced. When he passed away, I inherited about 40 years' worth of technical bulletins, service manuals, and parts catalogs." The inherited knowledge base explained capabilities that seemed incongruous with Maya's current circumstances. She wasn't working from internet research or generic repair guides. She was accessing institutional knowledge that had been accumulated over decades of professional motorcycle service. "The key to this repair," Maya said, now applying specialized compounds to prevent future corrosion, "is understanding that vintage motorcycles were designed as complete systems. When you modify one component, you create ripple effects throughout the entire machine. Modern shops often treat symptoms instead of addressing systematic problems." The philosophical approach to mechanical repair reflected understanding that went beyond technical competence into wisdom about how complex systems functioned as integrated wholes. Maya wasn't just fixing immediate problems, she was addressing the underlying issues that had caused those problems to develop. "Almost finished," she announced, installing the vital components with careful attention to alignment and spacing. "Now we test the timing advance mechanism manually before installing everything back in the engine." The manual testing revealed smooth operation that contrasted dramatically with the seized condition that had prevented engine operation. Components moved freely through their full range of motion, springs provided proper tension, and mechanical relationships functioned as originally designed. "Perfect," Maya said with satisfaction, beginning the process of reinstalling the timing mechanism into the knucklehead's engine case. "This should restore proper ignition timing throughout the engine's operating range."
But the timing mechanism repair was only part of the solution. Maya's diagnosis had identified multiple interconnected problems that required systematic correction to restore the engine to proper operating condition.
The carburetor still needs adjustment to compensate for the modified jets, she explained, moving to the fuel system with the same methodical approach she had applied to the timing mechanism. And the oil pressure needs to be recalibrated now that the timing advance is working properly. The carburetor adjustment required precise measurement of fuel flow rates and mixture ratios, using equipment that most mechanics would never encounter in routine work. Maya's portable gas analyzer could detect combustion efficiency changes, measured in fractions of percent, allowing optimization that went far beyond what conventional tuning methods could achieve. "This is incredible," Harold Peterson said, watching Maya work with fascination that had replaced his initial skepticism. "I've been around engines my whole life, but I've never seen diagnostic equipment like this used on a motorcycle." "Most shops can't justify the investment," Maya replied, adjusting fuel mixture with incremental precision. "But when you're working on rare or modified machines, having the right equipment makes the difference between adequate repairs and perfect restoration." The oil pressure calibration required different specialized tools that allowed precise adjustment of relief valve settings while the engine was running. Maya's equipment could monitor oil pressure at multiple points throughout the lubrication system, ensuring that modifications made for improved performance didn't create problems in other areas. "5 minutes remaining," Dave announced, though his earlier confidence had been replaced by obvious anxiety about the outcome of his million-dollar challenge. Maya looked at her watch, then at the knucklehead, which appeared ready for the moment of truth. All systems had been repaired, adjusted, and optimized. The engine looked exactly as it had at the beginning of the 2-hour challenge. But Maya's systematic work had addressed problems that had been invisible to previous diagnostic attempts. "Time for the test," she said, climbing onto the motorcycle with the confidence of someone who had no doubt about the outcome. The knucklehead started on the first kick. Its exhaust note immediately revealed the smooth power delivery that had been absent before Maya's repairs. But more impressive than the initial startup was the engine's performance as Maya worked through its complete operating range. The idle was smooth and consistent, without the irregular rhythm that typically marked timing problems. Acceleration was crisp and immediate, demonstrating fuel system optimization that extracted maximum performance from every drop of gasoline. And the exhaust sound carried the distinctive harmonic patterns that marked a perfectly tuned vintage Harley-Davidson engine. "Unbelievable," Tank breathed, his face showing wonder that bordered on religious experience. "It hasn't run this well since the day I bought it 3 years ago." Maya shut off the engine and dismounted with the satisfaction of someone whose confidence had been completely vindicated. Around her, 47 members of the Iron Brotherhood stood in stunned silence as they processed what they had just witnessed. 2 hours and 3 minutes, Maya announced, checking her watch with the precision of someone who understood that timing mattered in more than just engine repairs. "I believe that concludes our agreement." The silence stretched uncomfortably as the implications of Maya's success settled over the assembled crowd. Dave's million-dollar challenge had been based on assumptions about gender, expertise, and the nature of mechanical competence that had just been shattered by systematic demonstration of superior knowledge and skill. But the real impact of Maya's performance extended far beyond winning an unusual wager. She had challenged fundamental assumptions that governed relationships between men and women in traditionally male-dominated fields, proving through direct demonstration that expertise couldn't be measured by appearance, age, or social expectations.
Razor stepped forward, extending his hand toward Maya with the respect that marked acknowledgement of superior professional competence. "That was the most impressive mechanical work I've ever seen. You've earned our respect and more." The handshake sealed not just the conclusion of their wager, but the beginning of a relationship that would challenge the Iron Brotherhood to reconsider everything they thought they knew about mechanical expertise and the people who possessed it. As word spread through the truck stop and beyond about what had just transpired in the Nevada desert, Maya Santos had accomplished something that would resonate far beyond the immediate restoration of one vintage motorcycle.
She had proven that excellence recognized no boundaries, and that the most important repairs sometimes involved not just broken machines, but broken assumptions about who possessed the knowledge to fix them. The sound of the perfectly tuned knucklehead gradually faded into the desert silence, leaving behind a transformed landscape of assumptions and expectations. Dave Morrison stood frozen beside his motorcycle, the reality of what had just occurred settling over him like a physical weight. His million-dollar challenge had been based on certainties that Maya Santos had systematically demolished through demonstration rather than argument. "Well," Razor said quietly, his voice cutting through the uncomfortable silence that had settled over the truck stop parking lot, "I believe we have some commitments to honor." The reference to their agreement sent ripples of recognition through the Brotherhood. They had committed not to financial payment, which would have been impossible to fulfill, but to something potentially more valuable and certainly more difficult to deliver. A public acknowledgement that mechanical expertise transcended gender, age, and social expectations. Maya began methodically cleaning and organizing her tools, her movements reflecting the same systematic approach she had applied to the engine repair. The specialized equipment disappeared into organized compartments within her mobile cart, each tool returning to its designated location with practiced efficiency that spoke of professional habits developed over years of serious mechanical work. "Miss Santos," Tank said, approaching with an expression that mixed gratitude with something approaching awe, "I don't know how to thank you for what you just did. That engine hasn't run this perfectly since the day it was built." "Thank me by taking proper care of it. And next time you have modifications done, make sure the shop understands how different systems interact with each other. This problem could have been prevented with better integration planning." The technical advice was delivered without condescension, reflecting Maya's understanding that education was more valuable than criticism when dealing with people who genuinely wanted to maintain their machines properly. Harold Peterson moved closer to examine Maya's tool cart with the fascination of someone recognizing equipment that represented serious professional investment. "Miss, I've been around mechanical work my entire life, but I've never seen diagnostic tools like what you use today. That equipment must have cost more than most shops make in a year." 15 years of careful investment, Maya confirmed, securing the last of her specialized instruments. "I started with basic hand tools and added equipment as I learned what problems I wanted to solve. Good tools don't make you a better mechanic, but they let better mechanics do things that would be impossible otherwise." The philosophy behind her equipment choices revealed an approach to professional development that went beyond casual interest into serious commitment to excellence. Maya hadn't stumbled into mechanical competence. She had built it systematically through education, experience, and investment in capabilities that most people would never need. Mickey Wrench scratched his head as he processed what he had witnessed, his expression reflecting the cognitive dissonance that came from having fundamental assumptions challenged by undeniable evidence. "Maya, I gotta ask, what are you doing working at a truck stop in the middle of nowhere? With skills like yours, you could write your own ticket at any motorcycle shop in the country." The question touched on circumstances that Maya had learned to navigate carefully. Professional recognition in male-dominated fields often came with complications that extended beyond simple employment opportunities. Success could create as many problems as failure, just different kinds of problems. "I like the independence," Maya replied diplomatically. "Working for myself means I can choose my projects and maintain standards that might not be commercially viable in a high-volume shop environment." But Dave Morrison, whose challenge had precipitated the extraordinary demonstration, wasn't ready to accept the new reality that Maya's success had forced upon the group. His identity was based on assumptions about masculine competence and feminine limitations that couldn't be abandoned without psychological costs he wasn't prepared to pay.
This was just one lucky repair,
Dave said, his voice carrying the desperation of someone clinging to beliefs that had just been proven wrong. Anybody can get lucky once. It doesn't prove anything about overall mechanical ability. The protest drew uncomfortable looks from other Brotherhood members who recognized that Dave's position was becoming increasingly untenable. Maya's performance hadn't been lucky. It had been systematic, professional, and based on knowledge that went far beyond what casual enthusiasm could provide. "You're right," Maya said calmly, surprising everyone with her apparent agreement. "One repair doesn't prove overall competence, but I've been doing this kind of work for 15 years, and every engine tells a story if you know how to listen." She gestured toward the line of Harley-Davidsons parked throughout the lot, their chrome and paint reflecting the afternoon sun like a museum display of American motorcycle evolution. "That shovelhead over there," Maya said, pointing to a 1970s model near the fuel pumps, "has a cam chain that's stretched beyond specification. The engine sounds smooth now, but it'll start missing within the next 500 miles. The diagnosis, delivered without touching or even approaching the motorcycle, drew skeptical looks from several Brotherhood members. But the shovelhead's owner, a man called Johnny Pipes Patterson, moved toward his bike with obvious concern about potential problems he hadn't recognized. And the Sportster beside it has electrical problems that are causing intermittent charging system failures. The battery's probably going dead without warning, especially in cold weather." "How can you possibly know that?" Razor asked, though his tone carried curiosity rather than disbelief. "Engine sounds carry information about internal conditions," Maya explained, her voice taking on the patient tone of someone accustomed to explaining technical concepts to people without specialized training. "Cam chains make specific frequency changes when they stretch. Electrical systems create subtle variations in idle quality when they're not functioning properly." She pointed to a third motorcycle, this one a newer model with extensive chrome modifications. "That one has oil pressure problems caused by a clogged oil cooler. The owner probably thinks the temperature gauge readings are normal, but the engine's running hotter than it should." The rapid-fire diagnoses were specific enough to be verifiable, but they were delivered with such casual confidence that they seemed almost supernatural. Maya wasn't showing off. She was demonstrating that expertise developed through years of serious professional work created capabilities that seemed impossible to people who hadn't invested similar time and effort in developing their skills. "This is ridiculous," Dave muttered, though his protests were beginning to sound hollow even to him. "Nobody can diagnose engine problems just by listening to them run." "Want to check?" asked Maya, her tone remaining conversational despite the challenge implicit in her suggestion. "I'll be happy to verify any of those diagnoses if the owners are interested in knowing what condition their engines are actually in." The offer created a moment of decision that would determine whether the Brotherhood was ready to fully accept what Maya's performance had revealed about their assumptions and expectations.
Johnny Pipes was the first to move, wheeling his shovelhead toward Maya with the careful attention of someone who had invested significant money in a machine he depended on for both transportation and personal identity. His motorcycle represented more than mechanical transportation. It was a statement about values, lifestyle, and membership in a community that valued independence and self-reliance above conventional success. "If there's something wrong with my engine, I want to know about it," Johnny said, his practical concerns overcoming any hesitation about accepting diagnostic help from someone who challenged traditional hierarchies within motorcycle culture. Maya approached the shovelhead with the same systematic methodology she had applied to Tank's knucklehead, her hands moving over the engine components with gentle precision, while her trained ear analyzed the subtle acoustic signatures that revealed internal conditions. "Start it up," she requested, stepping back to listen with the focused attention of someone decoding complex information from apparently simple sounds. The shovelhead's exhaust note filled the parking lot with the distinctive rumble that marked vintage Harley-Davidson engines. To most listeners, it sounded healthy and strong. but Maya's expression showed concentration that suggested she was hearing details that escaped casual observation. "There," she said after 30 seconds of careful listening, "that metallic tapping at idle speed, synchronized with engine revolution, but slightly irregular. That's the cam chain making contact with the chain guide in ways that indicate excessive stretch." She moved to the engine compartment, her hands exploring specific areas with the confidence of someone who understood exactly where problems would manifest themselves. "The chain tensioner is at maximum adjustment," Maya continued, "which means the automatic tension system has compensated for wear as far as it can. Within 500 miles, maybe less, the chain will jump timing and cause serious internal damage." Johnny's face paled as he processed the implications of Maya's diagnosis. Cam chain failures could destroy engines completely, requiring rebuilds that cost thousands of dollars and left riders without transportation for weeks or months. "How much would it cost to fix?" Johnny asked, though he was already calculating whether he could afford to ignore the problem and hope it didn't fail at an inconvenient time. "$300 for parts and labor if you catch it now, $3,000 if you wait until it fails catastrophically." The financial implications made Johnny's decision easy, but they also reinforced Maya's credibility with the other Brotherhood members who were witnessing diagnostic accuracy that went beyond lucky guessing. "Can you do the work?" Johnny asked, already knowing the answer, but needing to hear it confirmed. "I can have you back on the road in 4 hours, but I recommend checking the oil pump while the engine's apart. Cam chain problems sometimes indicate lubrication issues that need to be addressed at the same time."
As Maya began gathering tools for Johnny's cam chain replacement, other Brotherhood members found themselves reconsidering their own motorcycles with new awareness of potential problems they might have overlooked. Her casual diagnoses had planted seeds of concern about mechanical issues that could leave them stranded in situations where help might not be readily available. "Maya," Razor said, approaching with the careful respect that marked his acknowledgement of superior professional expertise, "I think we need to discuss the terms of our agreement." The reference to their wager brought immediate attention from the entire group. Maya had fulfilled her part of the bargain by successfully repairing Tank's knucklehead within the specified time limit. Now the Brotherhood faced the challenge of honoring commitments that would require them to publicly challenge assumptions that had governed their organization since its founding. "A deal's a deal," Maya said simply, not looking up from her preparation for Johnny's cam chain repair. "But I'm not interested in humiliating anyone or forcing public statements that don't reflect genuine changes in understanding." The gracious response surprised several Brotherhood members who had expected Maya to demand full compliance with the terms they had agreed upon. Instead, she was offering them an opportunity to fulfill their commitment in ways that preserved dignity while acknowledging what had been demonstrated about mechanical expertise and gender assumptions. "What are you suggesting?" Dave asked, though his earlier hostility had been replaced by grudging recognition that Maya held the moral and practical high ground in their confrontation. "Instead of public statements about gender and mechanical ability," Maya replied, "how about practical action that demonstrates respect for expertise regardless of its source? When you encounter qualified mechanics, judge them by their work rather than their appearance or background." The alternative approach addressed the substance of their original agreement while avoiding the kind of public declaration that could create resentment or resistance within the Brotherhood's membership. "And," Maya continued, "maybe consider that expertise comes in unexpected forms. The best mechanics I know learned their skills in unusual places and circumstances that don't fit conventional expectations about professional development." The suggestion carried implications that extended far beyond their immediate situation. Maya was advocating for recognition that competence couldn't be measured by traditional credentials or social categories, but only by demonstrated ability to solve problems and produce results.
Tank, whose mechanical crisis had started the entire confrontation, stepped forward with an expression that mixed gratitude with newfound respect for Maya's professional and personal character. "Maya," he said formally, "I want to thank you not just for fixing my bike, but for teaching us something important about recognizing real expertise when we encounter it." The acknowledgement represented more than simple gratitude. It was recognition that Maya had provided education that went far beyond mechanical repairs into fundamental questions about competence, respect, and the assumptions that governed relationships between different groups of people. As the afternoon sun began its descent toward the Nevada mountains, creating long shadows across the truck stop parking lot, the Iron Brotherhood prepared to continue their journey to Las Vegas. But the group that rolled out of the truck stop would be fundamentally different from the one that had arrived earlier, changed not by external circumstances, but by internal recognition that their assumptions about expertise and competence had been incomplete. Maya Santos returned to her repair shop as word spread throughout the motorcycle community about what had transpired in the Nevada desert. The story would be told and retold, growing in the telling, but its essential truth would remain unchanged. A young woman had challenged assumptions about mechanical expertise and proven through direct demonstration that competence recognized no boundaries based on gender, age, or social expectations.
6 months later, Maya's repair shop had evolved into a destination for riders seeking the kind of expert service that could solve problems other mechanics couldn't even diagnose. Her reputation spread through word of mouth among people who valued results over conventional expectations, creating a business built on competence rather than assumptions about who possessed mechanical expertise. The Iron Brotherhood kept their commitment in the most meaningful way possible, referring qualified riders to Maya's shop regardless of gender or background, judging mechanics by their work rather than their appearance, and serving as advocates for recognition that expertise came in forms that defied conventional expectations. And Tank's 1947 knucklehead continued running with the smooth perfection that marked truly expert mechanical work, carrying its rider through thousands of miles with the reliability that came from repairs based on understanding rather than assumptions, executed by hands that had learned to listen to what engines were trying to say about their hidden problems and secret needs. The million-dollar bet had been won not through luck or accident, but through systematic application of knowledge earned through years of dedication to mechanical excellence. Maya Santos had proven that the most important repairs sometimes involved not just broken engines, but broken assumptions about the people qualified to fix them.